Good morning, everybody. This is Ying Yang, sort of on time at 5:10. It is Morsels of a Thought number 1143, and you can't see me because the light isn't on yet, which I'm bringing over here. Hopefully, hopefully you might be able to see me. I can't see you now because the light is on. um, Before we go on to our town, Thornton Wilder's play, I want to say that at 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will be showing off my 18 rings. I think I have 18. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 rings. I will show them off because I went to a consignment store yesterday and I noticed they sell jewelry. And you know how I love my jewelry. I got all started on it because of Dr. V and then the paparazzi. I'll probably show a few pieces of paparazzi as well for $4. I have a sign that says $5, but I'll be selling them for $4. That's a $1.20, $1.50 off because I paid tax on them, so I paid $5.50 on each of them. But anyway, that's the average I paid. I'll say that. And then shipping will be $4 as well. However, for these pieces, shipping will have to be true amounts. But I'll show you later because we are going into Thornton Wilder, our town. Now, our lovebirds are 16 years old. They're in high school. I think they're 16 years old. They're in high school. They're about to go into their senior year, so that would make them 16 going on 17. And they will be married in the they started out the second act as being at the wedding, and here we are going into a flashback to their first date at a soda pop store. Working the faucets. That's the stage manager acting as the proprietor of um, the store. 2 strawberry ice cream sodas. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There are 125 horses in Grover's Corners this minute I'm talking to you. State inspector was here yesterday, and they're hanging in these automobiles. The best thing to do is just stay home. Why, I can remember a dog could go to sleep all day in the middle of Main Street and nothing come along to disturb him. He sets the imaginary glasses before them. There they are. Enjoy them. He sees a customer. Right. Yes, Mrs. Ellis, what can I do for you? He goes out right. Emily says, they're so expensive. George, no, no, don't you think of that. We're celebrating our election. And then, do you know what else I'm celebrating? Emily says, no. And he says, I'm celebrating because I've got a friend who tells me all the things that ought to be told me. George, Emily, George, please don't think of that. I don't know why I said it. It's not true. You're George. No, Emily, you stick to it. I'm glad you spoke to me like you did, but you'll see. I'm going to change so quick. You bet I'm going to change. And Emily, I want to ask you a favor. Emily, what? George, Emily, if I go away to State Agriculture College next year, will you write me a letter once in a while? Emily, I certainly will. I certainly will, George. Pause. They start sipping the sodas through the straws. It certainly seems like being away 3 years, you'd get out of touch with things. Maybe letters from Grover's Corners wouldn't be so interesting after a while. Grover's Corners isn't a very important place when you think of all New Hampshire, but I think it's a very nice town. George says, the day wouldn't come when I wouldn't want to know everything that's happening here. I know that's true, Emily. Emily, well, I'll try to make my letters interesting. Pause. George, you know, Emily, whenever I meet a farmer, I ask him if he thinks it's important to go to agriculture school to be a good farmer. Emily, why, George, yeah. And some of them say that it's even a waste of time. You can get all those things anyway out of the pamphlets the government sends out. And Uncle Luke's getting old. He's about ready for me to start taking in over his farm tomorrow if I could. Emily says, my, George. And like you say, being gone all that time in other places and meeting other people, gosh, if anything like that can happen, I don't want to go away. I guess new people aren't any better than old ones. I'll bet they almost never are, Emily. I feel that you're as good a friend as I've got. I don't need to go and meet the people in other towns. Emily, but George, maybe it's very important for you to go and learn all that about cattle judging and soils and those things, or, of course, I don't know. George, after a pause, very seriously, Emily, I'm going to make up my mind right now. I won't go. I'll tell Pa about it tonight. Emily, why, George, I don't see why you have to decide right now. It's a whole year away. George, Emily, I'm glad you spoke to me about that fault in my character. What you said was right, but there was one thing wrong in it, and that was when you said that for a year I wasn't noticing people, and you, for instance, why, you say you were watching me when I did everything. I was doing the same about you all the time. But sure, I always thought about you as one of the chief people I thought about. I always made sure where you were sitting on the bleachers and who you were with. And for 3 days now, I've been trying to walk home with you, but something's always got in the way. Yesterday, I was standing over against the wall waiting for you, and you walked home with Miss Corcoran. Emily, George, life's awful funny. How could I have known that? Why, I thought, George, listen, Emily, I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to agriculture school. I think that once you've found a person that you're very fond of, I mean a person who's fond of you too, and likes you enough to be interested in your character, well, I think that's just as important as college is, and even more so. That's what I think. Emily, I think it's awfully important too. George, Emily, Emily. Yes, George? George, Emily, if I do improve and make a big change, would you be, I mean, could you be, Emily? I am now. I always have been. George, pause. So I guess this is an important talk we're having. Emily, yes, yes. George takes a deep breath and straightens his back. Wait just a minute and I'll walk you home. With mounting alarm, he digs into his pockets for the money. The stage manager enters. Right, George, deeply embarrassed but direct, says to him, Mr. Morgan, I'll have to go home and get the money to pay you for this. It'll only take me a minute. Stage manager, pretending to be affronted. What's that, George Gibbs? Do you mean to tell me? George, yes, but I had reasons, Mr. Morgan. Look, here's my gold watch to keep until I come back with the money. Stage manager, that's all right. Keep your watch. I'll trust you. George, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Stage manager, I'll trust you 10 years, George, not a day over. Got all over your shock, Emily? Emily, yes, thank you, Mr. Morgan. It was nothing. George, taking up the books from the counter. I'm ready. They walk in grave silence across the stage and pass through the trellis at the Webbs's back door and disappear. The stage manager watches them go out, then turns to the audience, removing his spectacles. Stage manager, well, he claps his hands as a signal. Now we're ready to get on with the wedding. He stands waiting while the set is prepared for the next scene. Stagehands remove the chairs, tables, and trellises from the Gibbs and Webb houses. They arrange the pews for the church in the center of the stage. The congregation will sit facing the back wall. The aisle of the church starts at the center of the back wall and comes toward the audience. A small platform is placed against the back wall on which the stage manager will stand later, playing the minister. The image of a stained glass window is cast from a lantern slide upon the back wall. When all is ready, the stage manager strolls to the center of the stage, down front, and musingly addresses the audience. There are a lot of things to be said about a wedding. There are a lot of thoughts that go on during a wedding. We can't get them all into one wedding naturally, and especially not into a wedding at Grover's Corners where they're awfully plain and short. In this wedding, I play the minister. That gives me the right to say a few more things about it. For a while now, the play gets pretty serious. You see, some churches that say that marriage is a sacrament. I don't quite know what that means, but I can guess. Like Mrs. Gibbs said a few minutes ago, people were made to live two by two. This is a good wedding, but people are so put together that even at a good wedding, there's a lot of confusion way down deep in people's minds, and we thought that that ought to be in our play too. The real hero of this scene isn't on the stage at all. And you know who that is? It's like one of those European fellas said, every child born into the world is nature's attempt to make a perfect human being. Well, we've seen nature pushing and contriving for some time now. We all know that nature is interested in quantity, but I think she's interested in quality too. That's why I'm in the ministry. And don't forget, all the other witnesses at this wedding, the ancestors, millions of them, most of them set out to live two by two, also. Millions of them. Well, that's all my sermon. 'Twa'n't very long, anyway. The organ starts playing Handel's Largo. The congregation streams into the church and sits in silence. Church bells are heard. Mrs. Gibbs sits in the front row, the first seat on the aisle, the right section. Next to her are Rebecca and Dr. Gibbs. Across the aisle, Mrs. Webb, Wally, and Mr. Webb. A small choir takes its place, facing the audience under the stained glass window. Mrs. Webb, on the way to her place, turns back and speaks to the audience. Okay, so we will stop right here. It is page 78. We will come back on this, I want to say tomorrow, but it will be next Sunday for our Sunday series, Our Town Play by Thornton Wilder. Yes. Okay, I will talk to you again later. And as a matter of fact, I'll be back at 8 o'clock my time, which is exactly 2.5 hours and 7 minutes from now. Okay, old Kinderhook. Bye. Dear God, goodness, this thing won't change the screen. Oh my gosh, the light really messes up something.